Hello, Frida Reba Darcy here, and Patricia O'Connor. Happy holidays. It's time for our Wednesday drop, and I thought that we would I would talk for a minute about this little guy. This is my introduction back into bonsai. It is several years old from clone. And as you can see, it's probably 2 years old. Yesterday, I put a little wire on it. The best way I could figure to wire this guy, and there's a reason for that. I'll zoom in a second when it's and get out of the backlight so I can show you some details. But as you can see, I wrapped the wire around the foot to use that as my anchor point, and then put a couple of twists on it, and then brought it up. And I'm not, as you can also see, I'm not wiring the trunk. I'm using that as a guy wire, and then I put a second guy wire back here. Now, the reason I went with the guy wires instead of wrapping the trunk in wire the way I would tend to do is because it is so full of buds. The first year I got this tree, it didn't bloom, and I was such the novice. I don't know if but I did wire it, and I put that bend in it, sort of like you see now, but sometime later I took it off before it dug in, and it almost completely straightened back out before I decided that I really didn't want it to straighten back out and put some bend back in it. I'll probably take this guy back the other way, or maybe around a different direction and around or something. But at any rate, the reason I went with the guy wires instead of wrapping the trunk, which makes it really easy to do that bend, is because it is just absolutely full of buds. Some of those are this spring's branches or next year's branches, and even, some of you may also know that we're going through an unseasonably warm winter, but wisterias do this regardless. You should be able to see next year's buds in the winter on your wisteria, even if you're not in some place where your winter has turned into something freakish and almost unrecognizable. But having said that, part of those are next year's shoots and part of those are next year's blooms. So it was just like walking in a minefield to try to stay away from everything, and then still not sure if it wasn't going to push out more and I would be right in the middle of all of that. So it seemed like to me like the best, safest way to go if I wanted to put any motion in this guy was to do it with my guy wire. So I got a little bit more of a hoop in that trunk, and I got a little bit of motion over in here. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with that. I think this was the one I did first to put the bend in it, and this one was just to bring this down. I can adjust it more as time goes, but this was something that I had ordered. Probably 4 or 5 of, and I ordered white ones and I ordered purple ones, and my idea was to have a wisteria trellis on my balcony, purple on one side, white on the other, and then they were going to be joined in the middle, and then it was going to have some really cool looking Indian looking like it belonged in a Indian garden somewhere, hummingbird feeder. Well, only part of that stuff would fly with the landlord, and about that time I got addicted to bonsai anyway, so I wrecked Eden for bonsai space, which isn't that just the way that would go. But in the meantime, before I made that transition, I did have a couple of wisterias left over after I had planted everything in planters, and it was, hey, I wonder what I could do with that extra beautiful, going to be beautiful white wisteria clone. And then I was kind of like, well, do you remember that hobby that you kind of wished that you would always get back to at certain times of your life, like when you were working in film and could never count on anything, that you had really missed bonsai? This might be your time. So with that little clone sitting in, with that little cutting sitting in a little nursery pot, I went to YouTube and typed in wisteria bonsai tree and fell down the rabbit hole, and all of that started with that. So, I mean, if you look at it in that light, that's a pretty impressive little tree. But here's what else. It's not necessarily the biggest knockout bonsai tree in the world. In fact, you know, here's my little joke about the things that you, sometimes the things that you're not in love with can maybe do better. The one that I'm actually cast aside, these are the wisterias that I've cast aside. And because they're in big planters, like we would know to do. Well, no, if you really wanted to do this right, of course you would plant this in your yard, providing you had a yard. If you don't have a yard, you go with big planters. And that's where those guys are. They're in large planters. And so the ones that that I'm just watering and not really paying attention to are getting really big, and I'm probably going to do some weird fusion thing. And I don't even know what colors those are, so that could be anything. But they're a lot bigger than the trunk on this one. So for all of my shaping it and all that, you can't really say that I've done anything to extend the girth of the plant, except that this is its second pot because I broke the first one by being clumsy. I'm really clumsy. But aside from just putting it in a cheap but really kind of what I thought was pretty bonsai pot, wiring it down to its base, and then putting it in bonsai soil, I haven't done a whole lot with it, except, well, there's a couple of things. One, when it comes to wisteria, yes, I feed it. Yes, I do, I feed it. But I also try to make sure that the fertilizer I use is low in nitrogen or no nitrogen. I hear stories that will keep it from blooming. And people will also tell you about these guys that that you can hardly, there's almost no way to overwater them. I'm here to tell you that's not true. People will also tell you that they will thrive in any kind of soil, even the worst soil. When I found that in a bonsai application, that also not to be true. So based on that, I thought, well, if I use really good potting soil and I put this tree in a bonsai pot, and then I put the bonsai pot in a little dish that has, or a little baking dish that has about an inch of water in it, then that'll be what the experts seem to say is absolutely fine. And you don't need bonsai soil because it's a wisteria. That's what everybody says. Well, if it's in a big, huge pot like the other ones I was showing you, they're not in bonsai soil. They're in regular potting mix. So whenever I planted that particular, the one we're looking at, bonsai tree, in some actually really good potting mix, it was soil retaining, which seemed like, you know, wisteria, soil retaining. We're not holding back anything here. And then I set that down in a small dish of water that would just come to the bottom of the pot. That soil wicked up that water so fast that there was never an exchange of oxygen and water. It was never a balance. It became a soggy, wet mess that became a soggy, putrid mess. The white flies moved in, the leaves fell off, and the tree started giving notice. So at that point, I probably could have backed off the water immensely, taken it, and I took it out of the water, of course, over that, and was rethinking my you can grow these in standing water the way you can a cypress idea, and but whenever I put it back in bonsai soil, something that would drain but would still hold a small amount of moisture, and something that wouldn't wick water up like a sponge, then I did put it back in my little baking tin, and it seemed to do real well. So yeah, yes, on the you can leave the pot bottom standing in water during the summer months and stuff, and that's a good way to make sure that you never ever it's never not getting watered, right? So that's just like one less thing you have to worry about. And what that actually does is it kills the root tips that are standing in the water, which actually acts like if you were going in there and raising the root ball out of the pot and then shaving the bottom and then putting it back down in there. So the root tips are constantly replenishing, and the advantage supposedly is the constant replenishing of the root tips. So that's what's going on there. I guess my point to the it's okay that it's not as big as the ones that I'm sort of neglecting is the one that I'm sort of neglecting are doing exactly what I want them to do. I mean, that's my version of them being out and being field grown. I don't have a field, so I have a bigger pot for them, and that's as big a pot as I want to allocate without giving up balcony space, which is my real estate. So they're doing exactly what I want them to do, and when this thing blooms, it's absolutely beautiful. It will never not be my first bonsai. Even if it dies, it'll be my first bonsai dying. But this is my Japanese Floribunda Wisteria. It has beautiful, last year it gave us beautiful white blooms, and it's absolutely a joy to have around. And I hope it stays okay, well enough in those guy wires to where that shape holds. I think it would do a really good, maybe windswept design. I should probably take that top branch and go that way with it. You know, I was kind of thinking, you know, just go this way and go this way and go that way and just put motion in everything. But, you know, it would be cool if that were a windswept. But right now, with all those buds all over it, I don't want to put a lot of wires to it. The tree is pretty malleable, so I've got a little while before I have to mess with that part. So yeah, that is probably a pretty good place to stop for now. I've covered fertilizer. I've covered what I know about watering and keeping them in water. My thoughts on how a bonsai doesn't have to be absolutely a bazillion years old to give you this bonsai in training, like my cypress trees behind them, gives me absolute bonsai joy, even though they've got a ways to go yet. Our Friday drop will be back on this puts us back on our Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. And our Friday drop will be about my cork bark oak. I'll probably be looking in there and seeing if any of my wires are digging in more than I think is acceptable. I say what I think is acceptable because I've decided I'm not just going to pull a wire in if it leaves a mark. This thing is supposed to grow bark, and if it grows bark, I'm not really worried about tiny little wire marks. I don't want them to get crazy. But anyway, we will probably do a Friday drop with this guy on the bonsai table, and everybody else is doing, this is my other Wisteria Floribunda. I haven't seen this one bloom yet, but it is a fusion, and they are two clones. I believe they're the same color. I don't remember what color that was. Could be white, could be purple, but I do remember thinking they were the same color. But I won't know until they bloom. So yeah, and there's our other little ball cypress that I put some wire to, And there's a little quick look at our Shohin Ponderosa. And there's a little quick look at our Bougainvillea. And then this is the, and this is my Kodaheim Forrest that I keep threatening to make a next video on. This stuff is finally starting to die back like I want it to, like we needed it to. But I don't think it's time for me to shape this just yet. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't need shaping. It does. I would just like to have a few more choices before I start making my selections, and we will get them soon enough. So yeah, that's just a little quick look at my that is an 18 tree. Yeah, I know it's an even number. It was 19. That is my 18 tree Kodaheim maple forest. Looking pretty ratty in the dead of, in the dead of winter like. But I'm just glad the leaves have finally decided to be winter and have died back. They were a mixture of some of all of it until a couple of days ago. In a Tokonoma pot. Yeah. So yeah. And that is us. Thank you so much for watching. It's been raining the last couple of days. Everything is wet and kind of what I would say wet and crispy looking, and just looks like, I don't know, maybe it's sweater weather. It's not really cold here. It's 50s, and the trees are loving the rain, and I seem to be on the right side of watering and rain, which I'm finally glad to see. And that's a little quick look at my Chinese Wisteria sinensis. It's blue, and I look forward to seeing it bloom. When I potted it, this is the anchor wire, but as you can see, I put a twist in it. That twist will line up with that if ever I get brave enough to run a sling from there to there and try to pull the pot down. And this is slightly over potted because I want it to grow into this pot. I'm figuring these two guys are together, and this is probably when I had more money than sense. So this is a Bonsai Mirai, really nice blue pot, and a blue Chinese sinensis Wisteria. So yeah, that's us. That's our Wednesday drop. Thank you so much for watching. Frida and I appreciate you. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we will see you guys on Friday. Happy holidays.